Give me a little intro there, Gomer.
There's no turning back now.
Let's put on the show.
You're listening to the Station 71 podcast. My name is Mario, and this week I'm joined by my co-host,
Beth?
Brian?
And Kirsten.
So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about this week, actually, which is very interesting. Lots of news. We have Brian got to visit Walt Disney World this weekend, so we're going to talk a little bit about his trip and some observations. So I'm pretty excited about that. But let's dive into some of these news topics. First thing we've got on here is that 2 NBA players have tested positive for COVID-19 at Walt Disney World. According to a press release from the NBA, 2 players have tested positive since arriving at Walt Disney World on July 7th. The NBA totals in about 322 players. So I guess the Disney bubble is not immune to the coronavirus.
Mm-mm.
Yep.
Did I send that thing to you guys the other day? That it was like the Disney bubble in 3 parts. It was going around Twitter.
I don't think so.
Okay. So one of the NBA players found out that apparently you could order like Uber Eats or something off of they're at Disney, but you had to go to the front to get it, and the people at the front gate wouldn't like hold the food and stuff for you. So he tweeted a picture of himself with the Uber Eats bag and was like, "Oh, fellow NBA players, you can go get Uber Eats, blah blah blah." And then the next tweet was that the same person now had to quarantine for 14 days because he stepped 1 foot outside of the Disney bubble.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yikes.
let me see if I can find it. I know I just poorly explained that, but it was something.
It's almost like this wasn't a great idea.
I get why they decided to do it this way. I get why they decided to try to put everybody in like one place and like isolate them, for lack of a better word. But I don't know. It's still just
Anything in the name of sports, right?
I guess.
Yeah,
It's
football
just-
here is going to be interesting.
Yes.
Is that even happening? Like,
They
what
haven't made
are
a
places
decision
saying?
yet, as far as I've heard.
My big bummer is that it's like tailgating isn't gonna be a thing probably, so that's the only reason I even care about football.
Yeah, if we do get football, I can almost guarantee there will not be tailgating.
Yeah. Unless maybe they do like every other parking spot or
At that
something.
point, though, why even do it? Like, the community is
Yeah.
the best part of tailgating, so.
It's true. And once you get a few drinks in you, your guard goes down and you probably do things that, aren't as safe as you normally would during a pandemic. Probably just not a great idea overall.
I just want you all to click this tweet that I sent you.
The comedic timing of it being laid out in these 4 panels is fantastic. And especially with the very official, the Kings obviously made him type up and send out this thing with their logo on it and everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
I like
man.
never mind, LOL.
Oh, that's good.
So there's your comedic moment for tonight. To bring it back around, it looks like Hong Kong Disneyland is going to reclose after an increase in COVID-19 cases. The title basically says it all. There's,
Yeah.
That's the right decision, though. Theme parks don't need to be open. I'm sorry. I know Florida's economy is mostly tourism based, but like,
They're also the worst in the country with
yeah.
coronavirus cases. But we'll get to that later, huh, Brian?
Yeah, we'll get to that.
I mean, we're
Um,
like almost the worst and we have no excuse, so it's okay. I feel for you.
I think South Carolina is like number 3, so I'm with you.
Hey, we're doing something right up here.
Yeah.
Next up on this list is Disney's cultural representative program has been suspended indefinitely. The offers that were laid out to employees for this program have been since revoked. Also, probably shouldn't be super surprising. It's not super safe to bring these people back into the park.
Yeah. I just feel like Epcot is going to be a lot less Epcot, though.
What was that, Kirsten?
I said, I bet a lot of them don't want to come. Like, imagine if you were like in a country that's being safe, like Sweden, and you're like, heck no, I'm not going over there. Those people are nuts.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
like exactly what I was thinking when I read this too. It's just so weird that I don't know, they would even have these offers out there.
Well, I mean, a lot of them go out really
Yeah.
early, like all the fall CP offers were already out. I bet they'll bring it back as soon as humanly possible, though, because it's so much cheaper for them to have CPs and like the IPs. So I
Yeah.
bet you once it's safe, that'll be like one of the first things they do, because paying full-time people and paying their overtime is not going to help them like get back any of the money they've lost.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were the first ones to come back when this is all died down. Like you said, it's almost free labor, as horrible as that sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing up that we have on this list is that Disney has confirmed Mary Poppins and Spaceship Earth projects are being postponed. I didn't see anything official from Disney. A lot of these articles have Disney spokesperson in them. So I'm going to say take this with a grain of salt. I definitely think that they are pushed back because of this whole ordeal.
Right. Like, obviously, Spaceship Earth is like listed as an attraction for Epcot right now, so that's
Yeah.
for sure. And it makes sense for them to not start like undertake this Mary Poppins project right now in an area that's perfectly like already constructed and everything.
Yeah. And the other thing of it is too, like, obviously the reason that parks are opening right now is because Disney wants the money. Like that's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
And for them to close stuff that could be bringing people in to start construction on stuff that's going to cost them money doesn't sound smart when they're probably already losing money from being closed.
Yep.
I don't know. This is just one that it's like I get why we're talking about it, but I don't think it should surprise anyone.
Right.
And then on top of that, more closures. Apparently, in a memo to cast members, Disney officially announced that they will be closing 2 attractions and a nighttime spectacular. So on the chopping block, we have Rivers of Light and Primeval Whirl and Stitch's Great Escape. My question is, didn't we already know Stitch's Great Escape was closing or closed? Like, we saw pictures of the animatronic gutted.
Right. I don't know why they have been trying to give us the runaround with this when it's very obvious that this attraction was gone for good.
Yeah.
I mean, they've even had the sign with the new meet and greet name up for quite some time. So, yeah, they definitely were not going to go back.
Yeah. But Primeval World doesn't really surprise me. It seems to have had, before the closing happened, a lot of technical issues where they were having to shut it down for periods of time during each day.
And it was operating seasonally too, wasn't it?
That's what I was just about to say. I'm pretty sure it went
Yeah.
seasonal right before all of this.
Yeah.
I'm going to say I'm not surprised that it's closing. I'm surprised that it's closing and we haven't heard about anything taking its place.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I honestly, this is going to be interesting from the standpoint of Disney doesn't really have many outside rides like this, like full track outside everything. Like if they close this and decide to remove it, obviously I don't think that's going to be anytime soon. How are they going to hide this from like general public? Are they just going to put up a wall around it and try
They're
to
gonna pull a
dismantle
Disney
it?
Quest and just let everybody see it look nasty.
But like but like the thing of it is there's so much open, like there's so much around it that I feel like it would be hard to wall this one attraction off to dismantle it. So is it just going to sit there and rot?
I honestly feel like they'll have to like close off all of Chester's and Hester's to work on this.
Oh, thank
And at
God.
the point
Oh,
that
darn.
oh, I knew that was coming. But honestly, if
terrible.
Primeval World's closed, why not go ahead and just close off the whole section? Nobody cares about Triceratops Spin. And I don't feel like that many people really care about the carnival games either. So at this point, you might as well just close the whole section off.
Yeah.
You leave Dinosaur open, but close all of Chester and Hester's off.
The problem that I have with that is it's like I get that and I agree with that. I think Chester and Hester should just close altogether. But
Of course you do.
but the problem being like how do you close off that without making it impossible to get to Dinosaur? Like
A little path.
Go
You can-
around.
Yeah, you can still go around and get to it from the other
Wait,
side.
do you think there's only one way to get to Dinosaur?
no,
Oh my God.
I do know that there is more than one way to get to Dinosaur, but I think that that's probably like the most inconvenient attraction to get to if they were to wall off all of Chester and Hester's.
That's why
Just-
he hates it. He's been riding Primeval World to get to Dinosaur this whole time.
All right, that's definitely not it. But,
I mean, realistically, all you have to do is block off that opening, right?
That
Doesn't
side
it,
opening?
Chester and Hester's only has like one opening.
it
Doesn't it?
does, yeah.
Well, it has the one from Dinosaur, the main one when you come under the bridge, and then the backside one from Finding Nemo the music.
Just put some planters in front of it. No one will probably even realize it's close.
I mean, you're probably not wrong. So that's pretty much all the news that we have this week. I guess I will turn it over to Brian to talk about your mini trip to Magic Kingdom.
Yeah. So I have a couple of things that I want to preface this all with. First of all, obviously, I would be lying if I wasn't saying that we wanted to go back to the parks because they were open. But in all honesty, I really was curious to see kind of how Disney dealt with this, and wanted to have something to kind of report on and give information to other people that might be considering going now or planning a trip. So I'll say that I want this trip report to be as unbiased as possible if I can do that. There will probably come times where it seems like I'm defending Disney on certain decisions, or maybe I'm being like nitpicky about stuff that other people might consider to be minor, but I just kind of want to put everything out there and let it be as I saw it, as unbiased as possible. I'll say we went on Sunday, which would have been the second day that Magic Kingdom was open. The crowds were extremely low. I will touch on this a good bit later, but when I say extremely low, it was ridiculously low crowds. So my experiences may not be exactly the same as other people going around this time. So we want to point that out too. And finally, probably the most important one is that I'm not a doctor, so I am not going to make any suggestion or call on whether or not it is safe to go back or not. And if I did, you should completely disregard my opinion because I am not a doctor. So I'm going to do my best to just point out what I saw Disney doing. And ultimately, it's up to everybody whether or not they feel comfortable going back or not.
Cool.
So I will get into it. We arrived at Magic Kingdom about an hour after they opened. It was 10 o'clock and they opened at 9. Coming through the gate is pretty much unchanged to get to parking. When we did park, obviously we noticed that the parking lot is pretty empty at this time. I would say that when we got there, I guess just overall, we got there at about 10. We left at 4:30 maybe. And about that time, I think it looked to be about as many cars there when we got there as when I left. And honestly, it's hard to approximate, but there were maybe a couple hundred cars there, which, I would say translated into maybe a few thousand people in the parks. It was very low, very, very low. So parking was easy. The weirdest thing that I noticed was that they were still doing preferred parking, which was probably the absolute worst deal you could have ever gotten at the time, because everybody was parked, within 10 rows of where preferred parking ended at. So that was, I don't know who paid for that, but there were some people that paid for preferred parking, which was
They're
really,
banking on the suckers that didn't know what they were getting into.
I guess so.
Wow.
I don't know. Like Jordan
They gotta
pointed
make
out
their money
specifically, and
somehow.
I got a good laugh out of it, but yeah. Let's see. So after we got through parking, we didn't take a tram, obviously, because we were so close, but I didn't even see them running at this time. I don't know if that's going to continue or not. I would assume that they're going to at least have tram available, for like ADA compliance and that kind of stuff. I would think they would have to have one. I'm not sure about that, but I didn't ride the tram if there was one offered, so can't really comment on that. And I say that we were very, very close. I mean, it would have been like we were like a tram's length from where we parked to walk into the TTC.
I read an article. I was just going to say, I read an article that the trams were indefinitely suspended
Okay.
just for the time being. So,
Which would be the right call, I feel.
and because they have handicap parking available, I'm assuming that that's how
Okay.
they're going to get around, being compliant.
That makes sense.
Like, I want to know how many people could fit on a tram. Like, how many can fit normally, and how many could fit if they followed like social distancing requirements. Because it would be like what, one group per row every 3 rows or something. Like, I don't
Yeah,
know. I'm curious.
probably. And I'll touch on it, like a lot of that when I talk about how we do rides and stuff, like in the future of this. But yeah, I would think they'd have to skip at least 2 rows in between groups.
That would be insane.
Well, honestly, I'll touch on this more. I'm surprised at how much they were able to distance on the actual attractions. But let's see. So we got to the TTC, and then they had the Advent Health tents that were set up to do temperature monitoring, and this went very quickly. Again, not very many people once we showed up, but they had. I didn't even bother to count how many tents, but I mean, you walked straight up to the tent. There was no line or anything like that, so it moved extremely quickly. And then after that, you just did a bag check, and we're in line for the monorail. So at the monorail, obviously they had lines sectioned off for 6-foot intervals for spacing. And we didn't have much wait time there, obviously, because there weren't many people. We got on the first monorail that came, and they sat us one group on each side of each car in the monorail. So for every, door opens, there's seating on one side, there's seating on the other side. They sat one group on one side and one group on the other side. So I would think that it was easily more than 6 feet. Side note, I had forgotten that they were doing an update to the monorail interiors, and they actually look pretty nice.
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 They are no longer
Jeez.
the very, very old school like print on the seats. It's very modern looking. Let's see, and then after that, uh, pretty similar to how you would normally enter the park, except now you just tap your magic band. There is no fingerprint scan. And one thing that Jordan pointed out that I didn't really notice until afterwards is that they actually have this like these things that they made to fit over where you like would normally touch your finger to make it kind of like blend in. Like it wasn't just taped off with a piece of cardboard that said "Don't touch." There was actually this like gold like foam thing that they had fitted over each one. So I was like, oh, that's kind of nice that they bothered to actually make something look good, and they didn't really have to.
Yeah, that's much appreciated. Don't want it to look like a shanty town.
Yeah, but of course, my dumb ass went up and touched the thing because it's like such a force of habit to attach my magic and then touch the thing. And the cast member was like, please don't touch it. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
But yeah. And I'm pretty sure she cleaned it immediately after I touched it. So after that, we do as you do when you get to Disney, and we decided to go try to jump in line for Seven Dwarfs. Now, I'll touch on this a little bit as we go throughout, but the the My Parks app was being as it is and was just kind of
functioning as normal.
Yeah, exactly. The wait times were constantly being updated, and they were almost always incorrect. But I will say they were always the stated time was much longer than the actual wait time ended up being. So, for example, I believe when we first got in, it said that there was a 25-minute wait for Seven Dwarfs, and we thought, oh, well, that let's go ahead and do it in case it gets crowded later or something. And we maybe waited 10 minutes at most. And I guess now I'll kind of touch on how they actually set up the queue. So as you can imagine, there's social distancing markers on the ground. And it's one group stands on each social distancing marker, and then you move up as the person in front of you moves up. And it obviously takes a lot longer to move through the queues this way because you're kind of just going this like weird start and stop thing. But I will say that from the day that we went, everybody was being very, very respectful of social distancing. And this might sound elitist and I don't mean it to, but I also kind of feel like the people that are going this early are only like pass holders or really big Disney fans that are going to be kind of more conscious about that because we like care more about the parks maybe. Again, once this starts getting crowded and once more people start coming back, if the parks continue to stay open, I don't know if that's going to be the case. You're always kind of putting your faith in other people's hands with something like this too. But I will say from my experience, everybody was observing the social distancing markers very well.
Well, it's good to hear.
Yes. Once we got into the queues, in the majority of them, and especially in the more popular rides, a lot of them had these plexiglass barriers put up between where the where the queues would switch back on each other. And obviously that's a nice touch that they did that for safety. And then on ones that they, I guess, maybe weren't able to put those, and even on the ones that did have the plexiglass dividers, I believe almost all of them had, if the queue switched back on itself, there would never be two social distance markers like next to each other on the side of the divider, if that makes sense. Like they would always be like staggered diagonally. So you would never, like if the switchback was like 10 feet long and you turn around and it's another 10 feet long, like there would never be two markers on like the 5-foot mark where there's two people standing next to each other. Like they would always be staggered out closer to the ends on the other side so that you wouldn't be close to people that way either. One thing too about being in the queues, and this is again where I'm going to be, this is why I wanted to preface this, because I know this is going to sound like really stupid and nitpicky coming from like a really big Disney fan, because nobody else is probably going to care about this. I say this like, I'm very glad that they are taking these steps, and I don't want this to come off at all as like, oh, Disney shouldn't be doing that, because absolutely, like anything that they're doing to help keep it safer, it's great, and they should continue doing it. But again, I just want to throw all this stuff out there. The dividers kind of like really broke into the theming at some places. And again, that's not nearly as important as keeping people safe. So by all means, have them up there. And then the other thing is moving through the queues. Again, I'm glad that everybody was being so conscious of like where they are, and you're constantly like, everybody's really like looking around them to make sure that they're, not running into people, coming up from behind, like encroaching on people's space. But also I noticed that like I really was focusing on that a lot and not focusing much on looking around and enjoying the theming. But again, safety, obviously number one priority, but just something to keep in mind if you're coming to the parks.
It would help it be themed better.
What?
You said, it would help it be themed better is if whenever you came into the park, they treated you like George Sanderson and just gave you like a tent and a cone.
2319.
I was gonna say not being open, that might also help it feel better themed.
I mean, that would obviously be the safest option.
That's funny.
Let's see. So once we finally got up to the actual ride of Seven Dwarfs, they were continuing to keep people very spaced out. There were at least 2 rows in between each party, and that was pretty much consistent on everything that we went on. Even for like Omnimover attractions, they would put two of each ride vehicle in between each group, which was again nice to see that they were doing that. And I know I wanted to state this specifically. Obviously I've been seeing a lot of people on social media and even news articles and stuff really bashing Disney for being open, and it's a completely valid criticism to have of Disney. But I also saw people, I don't know if they were unaware of it or just weren't mentioning it, but it really felt like a lot of people thought that Disney kind of just like opened up the gates and were like, all right, guys, come back in. And especially about the ride vehicles, people saying, well, okay, they can social distance in the park, but what are they going to do when you actually get on a ride? The social distancing was definitely still being followed on rides. And I was really surprised because, obviously that cut down on capacity a ton, being able to put people through rides when you're only using, less than half of the seating on each ride vehicle. So I just wanted to make special note of that. Again, not trying to defend Disney, but I am saying that don't think that, it was just like a free for all once you actually got onto the rides. They are still observing social distance. After that, I'm not going to obviously go in depth with every ride that we went on. I just thought that was a good example. But after that, we rode Buzz. Sorry?
I was just going to ask you which ones did you go on, but if you're going into that, then don't mind
I'll
me.
touch on it. We hit a lot of attractions. I'll touch on most of the ones that we did just to kind of give you an idea like how much we were able to get done. So like I said, we got there at 10, we left at 4:30, so we were there for about 6.5 hours. And we definitely weren't like just hitting attractions hard. Like we were trying to take our time to go through the parks. I'll touch on it. We went to Tom Sawyer Island for a little bit, but we were able to get in a good number of attractions.
Cool.
Let's see. So after Seven Dwarfs, went on Buzz. That was a walk-on. That was most of the things that we went on were walk-ons. There's a couple of other ones that I'll make note of. But again, on Buzz, they were keeping 2 ride vehicles in between each party. And then and like nobody gets close to even walking onto the like conveyor belt platform like until your group is called up and they allow the the ride vehicles to pass. So we did that, and then we went on Space Mountain, which was pretty much a walk on. We might have waited like 2 or 3 minutes for loading, and obviously Space Mountain already has a pretty low capacity, and then with that being shortened even more because of the social distancing thing, it was mainly just waiting to get the very few people in front of us online actually onto the attraction. So from getting parking, riding the monorail, going through the gate, spent a little bit of time just kind of walking around before we went on these 3 attractions, but we did all 3 of these in under an hour. So just to kind of give you an idea of how very low the wait times were, like we hit 2 very big attractions and 1 smaller one very easily under an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, especially with being Seven Dwarfs and Space Mountain, ones that usually have fairly long wait times most of the days.
Right. Man,
So-
you would a lot of times wait an hour just like in the standby for Seven Dwarfs by itself.
I would say an hour wait time for Seven Dwarfs is below par. So
Yeah.
we went to Main Street next to kind of like look around and just kind of take in the park and the Emporium and everything. This was one of the things that I hadn't heard about them doing. Maybe you guys heard, but so obviously they're not doing parades now, but they're doing this kind of weird thing where like every 15 to 30 minutes, I don't know exactly what the interval was, but they would send a single parade float like all the way down the normal parade route.
They're doing that, and they're doing like cavalcade stuff where they're sending out like characters like Merida with the horse, and
Okay, I did see the Merida on the horse thing because
they're doing like distance style character meet and greets so that the characters are still out, but they're not. It's weird. I do agree with that. I don't know how I feel about it, but
Well, I mean, as far as it goes, not being able to do parades, I think this is probably the next best option because you don't have it scheduled to a certain time, so it's not drawing a crowd, and that's the goal.
yeah.
But you still get to see, it's kind of a nice happenstance, like you just happen upon it if you happen to be in the right place at the right time.
It reminds me
which
of
is cool.
like how we hear stories about when the characters used to just like wander around the parks.
Yeah.
The good old days.
And speaking of Merida on that horse, I don't know if y'all saw that video earlier this week.
Yes, I did.
Goodness
Terrifying.
gracious. Props to her because she clearly knew what she was doing in that situation.
Her and the handlers both were obviously pros.
That is a situation that could have very, very, very quickly turned bad, and I was very impressed to see how well they handled that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, for sure.
props to all of them. But as far as I don't know, the parade float thing was kind of weird to me, just because it's like it's coming and nobody really cares because there's not the rest of the parade coming behind it. I don't know. It felt very weird seeing it happen in person, and like there not being a crowd on Main Street. But I also think just overall that was kind of a weird feeling because of how empty the park was.
Yeah, I did see somebody post a video that they were using the Move It, Shake It float and playing the Get Your Ears On song.
They
So
sure were.
that would have made me personally very excited to see. But of course, that is very personal, not necessarily the mass opinion.
But overall, I'll say that I think this is where I don't know. I don't want to give my overall impression yet, but I will say it was a very, very strange experience being in the park with it like this. And I think this is when it really started to set in, because we kind of came in and, we walked around a little bit, but we mainly went straight to ride a couple of attractions first and then came back. And like with the parade thing, that kind of hit me. And now finally kind of just looking around Main Street and realizing how empty it was. Like it's hard to explain how odd that feels. This was far, far and above the lowest I've ever seen crowds in the parks. And I mean, I've been going for pretty much my whole life. I remember telling Jordan that kind of like, I even remember as a kid sometimes we would go in the early fall, and it was a very, very, very low time for the parks then. And I remember I was like, it almost felt kind of weird then remembering back as a kid, because I was like, oh, like nobody's here, because I'd also gone during the summer and stuff too, when obviously the crowds were a lot higher. But I was like, nothing has ever felt like it was this past Sunday when we went. I mean, being at parties and other like special events with like a cap number of people, it was nothing like this. I know that the kind of the number that people seem to be throwing around is that Disney is trying to keep capacity under 30%. I don't think that it was anywhere close to even half of that. It was felt absolutely deserted while I was there.
Man, stop talking me into it.
But honestly, I'm trying. It almost wasn't a good thing. Like it was almost too few people. Because honestly, like almost everything that we rode, we walked onto, and that's the one good part. But I don't know. It really felt like the atmosphere of the park wasn't there, and I really felt like a lot of that had to do with there being almost nobody else in the park.
Yeah, I can understand that. I read an article the other day about Oga's Cantina deciding to actually reopen with Hollywood Studios, or at least if, at some point during the, I don't know, a few weeks after it opens. I can't remember the exact date, but that they're going to operate at less than 50% capacity, and they're having to do, obviously social distancing. And so the estimate was like there would be maybe 50 people, whereas the normal capacity is like 240 something.
Oh wow.
And
Yeah.
the times that I've been to Oga's Cantina, I feel like that's a lot of the allure, is that it feels like this pub because there's all this chatter going on and people, and I feel like it's going to be really weird to be quiet and distanced and not have that atmosphere. So I can kind of understand what you're going for as far as the parks go, just on a much larger scale, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about it, honestly. It's weird because I've always said I want to go when the parks are at lower capacity, and now they are, and I'm just like, I have no desire to go. I guess obviously given the circumstances it's a little different, but
Yeah. It was very hard to explain. I kind of wasn't prepared for how it would feel. I'll say that. Aside from there being so few guests there, a lot of the stuff really that makes Main Street so good isn't there as well. There's no streetmosphere going on. I don't believe I saw any of the balloon people or like the souvenir carts or anything like that there. There were a couple of photo pass people set up, but it's kind of weird being on Main Street and not really seeing people most of the time. Let's see. The other big thing that I also wasn't aware of is that a lot of the stores are closed. That is another thing that I hadn't heard about.
huh.
Yeah. Emporium was open. Memento Mori was open. But a lot of the smaller ones were not open. Frontierland Trading Depot was not, which I was a little bit disappointed about because I was looking to get into some pins, but just another thing that I'll, to keep in mind for anybody that might be planning on going, that, just let you know what's open and what's not.
Were the stores that were open, were they enforcing any sort of capacity that you noticed?
Yes. And again, it was so dead when I went. I don't think they were really having to enforce it. Going into the store, there were, a team of cast members at each entrance. I guess I want to say too that there were most of the stores that have multiple entrances were only, each entrance was either an entrance or an exit. There, you weren't crossing paths with people, but at each entrance there were cast members there, and they seemed to be they had clickers, so I'm assuming that they were taking count of people coming into the store. So they were definitely measures in place, I feel like, to keep capacity down, but I don't think, like, we never had to wait to go in a store, and I think that's just because that the crowds were so low that the day we were there that they weren't having to make people wait. But it seemed like they were set up to make people wait if they needed to.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So after that, we went to Tom Sawyer Island for a little bit. And this, again, everywhere I saw, I will say, Disney did a very good job of social distancing. Even on Tom Sawyer rafts, each group went on, there's like a triangle set up with dots. So there's like one on one far corner, one on the other far corner, and then one on the middle and the other side. So it was like as far apart as you could move through groups of people. And that's how we took the raft over to Tom Sawyer Island.
I
And
gotta
even when we got-
imagine the demand was not super high.
it was not, as it usually isn't for Tom Sawyer
Right.
Island anyways, but just in case anybody was worried about that, they are still definitely doing it right there.
That's probably the safest place you can be.
Probably.
Magic Kingdom.
Yeah, it's already so spread out. But even once we got to Tom Sawyer Island, I know with a lot of the, like when you go in the caves and stuff, they have little things, and it's mostly like themed signs though that are like exit only, that look like it was in their handwriting. But now they have like really official signs up in front of everything, like, hey, no, this is like seriously, this is you only go in here, you only come out the other side. So that was all set up like that. And I guess the other thing I should touch on too that I should say is that there's hand sanitizer stations like everywhere in the park. Every queue that we were in had like multiple hand sanitizer stations within each queue. And even Tom Sawyer Island had a ton of them all over the place. And I kind of feel like Tom Sawyer Island is like that forgotten section of Magic Kingdom, but even here they had plenty of stations set up if you needed to sanitize.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, like we had our own hand sanitizer too. Jordan came set up with the fanny pack with all the sanitizer, so we were good to go either way. But in case you happen to forget yours, just be aware that they have lots of hand sanitizer.
Nice.
Let's see. After that, we went back over and we had lunch. Another thing that I was not aware of was how many of the restaurants are closed, especially the quick service ones. So when we went to make reservations, our options were Skipper Canteen, the Plaza Restaurant, Pinocchio Village House, Cosmic Rays, and Tony's. Everything else was closed.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you picked Tony's, right?
It was so funny because that is verbatim. Jordan listed all those off to me, and I said, I guess we're going to have to eat Tony's. We did not eat at Tony's. We went to the Plaza Restaurant, which I have not been to in I don't even know how long. I had forgotten how small it was. Like, I think I went as a kid, but that's a really small restaurant.
It's very small.
Yeah. But we ate there. Again, you're doing social distancing. All the tables were very spread apart. They made this was another thing too that I saw that I really liked that Disney was doing that I wish restaurants around me would do, is that they ensure that you are wearing your mask until you sit down at your table, and then you can take them off. And when you go to leave, they ensure that you put your mask back on before you get up from your table and walk out. So that was also a nice touch. But again, I feel like that's something that everywhere should be doing.
Yeah.
Did you see anybody like get combative about anything?
I have one story that I'll touch on in just a little bit. I saw there was one of those people. I will say in the people that I saw at the park after being there for 6.5 hours, I saw one those people. So but yeah, for the most part, everybody was being good. Even with stuff like that with the restaurant, nobody was really like seemed to be pushing it or anything. Even people that were walking around eating snacks and stuff, it really seemed like, they would like pull their masks down if they ate something and then immediately cover back up. So
Well, that's
I'd
good.
say, yeah, like 99.9% of the people I saw were doing a good job. And again, I don't know how well this will continue. Obviously, it's kind of a crapshoot if you were to go as to how the other guests are going to behave. But luckily, on our day, it seemed like everybody was doing really good. Now I have a special section set aside for the Haunted Mansion, and there's a
Oh no.
no, and there's a legitimate reason for this, is because I'm really glad that I did it, because I was talking to Jordan and I said up until this point, I I knew I wanted to do kind of an unbiased review of this to give other people information, but up until I got on the Haunted Mansion, I really felt like like I was still kind of in that just, oh, I'm excited to be in the parks. I'm excited to be in the parks. And it's like glad to be back. And going on the Haunted Mansion and this one specific story that I'll tell you about really made me kind of step back and be like, oh, okay, if I'm looking at this from somebody else, like from their point of view that doesn't get to go to the park as often as I do, that may be planning a trip from out of state or something like that, they're not going to see it anywhere near like I'm seeing it. So that's why I wanted to make special note of the Haunted Mansion. I've said it before and I'll say it again. In my opinion, the attraction that is the Haunted Mansion begins well before you ever get in a queue for the ride. And I will defend that for the rest of my life, because I think that, the Haunted Mansion, part of why it is so good and my favorite attraction is that really its location, its like, appearance from Liberty Square is like part of what makes the actual ride experience what it is. So with that in mind, with the social distancing measures that are put in place, it's kind of odd because, like I said before, as you're moving through the queues, you're paying a lot more attention to where you're at in line and where other people are in relation to you than you are obviously looking around and like taking in the stuff that's in the queue. So first off, like even somebody that's ridden Haunted Mansion, I don't know how many times, like, and knows everything that's in the queue, I still felt like, oh man, I'm really like kind of getting bounced through this queue and I'm not getting to take a lot of stuff in. I feel like that anyways. Like I honestly think Haunted Mansion is a better experience if there's about a 15-minute wait for it, so that you can move slowly through the queue and take in everything. So
I kind of agree with that. Yeah.
yeah. And then they had the spacing markers as usual, like all the other rides did. But the biggest downside, I think most obviously, is the stretching room scene. You don't go through the stretching room scene anymore. You walk through it, and the room's already extended, and it's just another part of the queue there. And I know we did a report on that or touched on it in news, so I knew that was going to happen. So I was kind of prepared for it. And this one experience was really what made me take a step back and kind of like, no, I need to look at this from somebody else's opinion, or like try to look at it from their point of view. The guy behind me in line, it was a guy and two women, and it was very clear that this was either his first time in the park or his first time riding Haunted Mansion, because they were trying to explain to him the stretching room scene. And I remember one of them was saying, okay, no, look, okay, so like look at that portrait, but cover up like the bottom 2/3 of it, okay? And then it'll like slowly move your hand down, and that'll be kind of like how it goes, and the room stretches.
They
And
probably sounded insane.
I was trying so hard not to laugh, and then she's like, okay, and then you realize like there's no doors or anything, and so the voice, and then it's like, well, there's always my way, and you look up and like there's a guy hanging there, and like it was funny, but at the same time, I really like paused for a minute, and I was like, man, I would absolutely hate for that to have been my first experience with the Haunted Mansion.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. That's wow. That was
So
painful just hearing it explained.
it
It's a
really
shame
was.
though.
Because you can't, I mean, you can't put that out on paper and expect anybody to get anywhere near the sort of experience that you would get from doing it. Um, and so after that, we went on the ride. I'll say that they spaced out just like they did before with two doing buggies in between groups and everything. But I was talking to Jordan about it, and I was like, it felt like we got dropped onto the middle of the ride, because you don't go through the queue with enough time to appreciate it. You don't go through the stretching room, which I mean, it in my opinion, it's not a pre-show; it's part of the show. So I really, I'll say like the Haunted Mansion in this state is very much a shell of itself.
That's a bummer.
So, but again, I'm kind of glad that that happened and I was able to kind of step back because I think it helped me have like a less biased opinion of what this experience would be like for other people.
Yeah.
Were there
So-
any other rides that you noticed that were kind of similar to that? Like, you feel like if this was your first experience on the ride, which I'm not sure if this should really be anybody's first experience at Disney, but if it was, is there anything that you felt like would be totally just taken out of it?
I mean, obviously, I think Haunted Mansion is like the easiest one to point out and say that, like, yeah, it's not the same. Even little stuff like when we did Journey of the Little Mermaid, wait, Voyage of the Little Mermaid. Gosh,
I hate so much that there's
I-
two rides that have such
Yeah.
similar names.
Two very different
the
attractions.
one when you get in the shell at Magic Kingdom, even the little like pre-show area with with Scuttle, I think
Yeah.
with Scuttle with the crabs bringing off the different things, and he tells you what they are. You get pushed through that area obviously because there's no line, so you miss that. Just overall, that any of the theming of the queues was, you don't really pay attention to it as much. I don't know if any of them were as bad as Haunted Mansion though. Some of the stuff like with Big Thunder, we you didn't get the some of the little things to do there, but none of them were nearly as bad as Haunted Mansion. Let's see.
Wasn't there an interactive queue in Seven Dwarfs?
Yes, which
But
is
did it get taken out before all of this? I feel like I remember that. I've never been through the standby line. I've always used Fast Pass on that, so I never got to see the interactive queue parts.
now I don't know if there was more that they took away, but there were certain sections. Like I don't remember seeing the ones where you like spin the little things where everybody tries to spin that. But they had so much of the queue roped off because capacity was so low. But some of the stuff that they did have, like they had signs over it saying "Do not touch." I'm trying to think, where else did I see this?
Oh my God! What about Winnie the Pooh?
I didn't even bother go. Like I obviously that honey wall has to be shut down. If it's not, then
That
It
honey
may-
wall is nasty on a good day.
exactly.
Honestly, I think that may be my new favorite Brian quote. That honey wall has to be shut down.
Oh man, yeah, that I would not want to see any kind of like bacteria swab off of that thing,
No.
at all. But I'm trying to think if there's any others that I notably saw the interactive stuff like roped off. I feel like anything that had it was roped off, but I can't remember any other specific ones. Just one cool thing too on that note though. We rode Peter Pan, which we almost walked onto that too. There's another one that you don't normally see. But I will say the cool thing about that is that for the very short time that we were in the interactive part of the queue, because you don't actually touch anything, you still get to do the interactive stuff, which was nice.
Oh, that's good.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
makes
so
sense.
Yeah. Let's see. Kind of just stuff I'll touch on. I have a lot more stuff to say about like overall at the end, but rest of the day, we kind of just went around attraction hopping. One thing I noticed is that the queues are definitely set up to be able to deal with social distancing while still, like as crowds increase. Almost every attraction that you could think of that would normally have, probably over a 45-minute wait on most days, they had the entire queue sectioned off in 6-foot sections, and then they would also have the markers extending out into the surrounding area and wrapping as close to like walls and stuff as possible to keep you away from other guests. And the most ridiculous one was obviously Seven Dwarfs, which came out the queue and literally wrapped the entire way around the outside of the attraction with social distancing markers. So I don't I don't know. I hope that while this is going on that the queue doesn't reach a point where that's necessary, but they do have it set up if they need to.
I mean, it's good to have it set up if they need to, I guess.
Yeah. But it was pretty crazy seeing it wrap that far around. Okay. So for the theater shows, we went to Country Bear Jamboree, obviously.
Of
and
course.
and the Tiki Room. And the seating was very, very spaced off in there too. We didn't do Fill Our Magic, but I would assume that it was the same for that. Tiki Room was good. I guess another thing I'll say, I know I said that a lot of the restaurants, the quick service restaurants, were closed off. Some of the snack locations were too. A good number of the snack locations were too. Gaston's Tavern was, for sure, that I remember off the bat, because we wanted to get a LeFou's brew. Aloha Isle was open, so at least we were able to get a Dole Whip swirl float before we went to the Tiki Room. But they are pushing very heavily on mobile orders. So actually, when we came up to Aloha Isle, they had cast members at the start of every gate, and they'd ask you that, have you mobile ordered? And if you said no, which we hadn't, they said, okay, well, we'd really appreciate it if you could mobile order if possible, if you have a phone to do it with. So they said, oh, okay. So we just backed out of line and did the mobile order. So another little thing that they're trying to do to help social distancing.
Nice.
I feel like that was a long time coming, though. Like in this environment, obviously it's the best way for them. But Disney pushing mobile ordering, come on, we should have seen that coming.
Yeah, and again, a lot of the stuff that they're implementing during this time, it's kind of like, cool. Let's keep that going. If this all gets taken care of, however long that takes, let's keep some of these things in place because they're not bad ideas. So when we went to Country Bear Jamboree, this was my one experience with one of those people. And I mean, I get it, tensions are high. Everybody is very excited to be back in Country Bear Jamboree. So I can understand why somebody, might be emotional and but I'm joking. But so with Country Bear Jamboree, they had every other row completely blocked off. And then on the rows that were available for seating, they had obviously staggered sections. You couldn't just everybody sit down in a row. So very, very limited spacing. So we actually ended up showing up right before one of the shows was about to start. So it was me and Jordan, and then this two older couple, one older couple, two people in line behind us. So we were the last ones to come in there. So cast member kind of ushers us through, and we get in there, and as normally happens in the theaters, people don't scoot all the way down to the right, so we got there, we saw that obviously most of the people had not slid all the way down, so that there was not seating without walking past people. So we did the most logical thing, which was we walked down one of the rows that you were not allowed to sit in to get up to one of the rows that you could in where people hadn't slid down, right? Seems like a
Okay.
pretty logical thing to do. The
Yeah.
couple behind us were not having it. And I will say it was mainly the older gentleman of the couple that was being vocal. He was not happy. He was wondering where they were expecting him to sit. He had a couple other choice words that I'm not going to repeat on here, but eventually decided to sit down on the very edge of one of the rows that you are not supposed to
Oh
sit
my
in.
gosh.
Oh boy.
Which, okay, I mean, honestly, with the way it was spaced out, it may have been like the furthest away from somebody that he really could have sat without walking past people. But he was also in a very bad mood because, he had to go through the trouble of finding his own seat. And then on top of that, sat down and almost immediately took his mask
Oh
off.
my gosh.
So, which I know. Now the cast member, upon noticing it, immediately told him to put his mask on. And I don't know if it was him or somebody else during the show, but somebody else apparently may have pulled their mask off. I didn't see it, but the cast member did in the middle of the show. Call out to the person to fully put their mask back on. So
Good. Embarrass them.
yes, embarrassed.
Well, and
But
here's the other thing too. Like, we talked about this recently. Disney has mask break spots. Like,
yes.
just go there.
Mhm.
Relaxation station.
Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know. I thought this was especially ridiculous just because I'm like, okay, look, man, you're getting to sit down and it's cool in here. Like, this is the one place that you should be okay with wearing the mask. It's like
Right.
anything. I think you'd want to take it off when you're hot and walking around outside, but I don't know. But I will say, throughout the entire time we were there, this is the only person that I saw that was being that way. So
Um,
So he was
I
mostly
feel bad for
mad
the
that
cast members.
What was that?
I
I
agree. I also feel bad for the
I feel
cast
bad for the
members.
cast
Oh
members trying
yeah.
to force that. Like, people are
yeah.
so nutso about this. Like, those poor people.
Which
I was
I don't get this, and I didn't want to talk too much on like the actual, you know, issue of wearing the mask. And obviously, like, you just wear the mask. But I don't get why knowing that that's what the rules are, like, you come and then are gonna like make a deal out of it. Like, you knew what this was.
You
None
knew
of
what
us
this was.
have to. None of us have to be in the parks right now, and if you're there, you have to wear the mask. So if you're gonna make that big of a stink about it, just don't come.
Really?
Yeah. I'm
Did
glad to
you?
hear that they're enforcing it though, because you can't give people an inch.
No, I was very happy. Even with it occurring in the middle of Country Bear Jamboree, I am very happy that they were strictly enforcing the mask policy.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Did you happen to see any of the relaxation zones? I know that it's probably not something that you were looking at, but I'm curious how they happen to do those.
I did. There was one that we walked past a couple of times. It's set up where the Pirates League is. So very, very off in the corner. And I mean, it's essentially just a place with seats that you sit down that is spaced out approximately how a restaurant would be, where you can take your mask off.
Okay.
We didn't do it. I'm gonna say I don't know. I mean, obviously I live in Florida. I have to wear my mask outside very often, so I don't know if I'm kind of used to it, but I thought it was gonna bother me. It really wasn't that big a deal wearing the mask outside all day. And I'll say Sunday it was a high of 94, and it's always muggy in Florida, so it's not that. Just wear the damn mask, basically. If you go, like, there's not that much of like, you don't have an excuse. Either don't go if you can't wear the mask. It's not that big a deal to wear the mask. So
Yeah.
overall thoughts though? Like, did you felt safe? I'm guessing.
Overall impressions. Again, I don't want to talk too much on this because this is my opinion, and I strongly do not want to speak to anybody else and say, hey, it's safe for you to go back to the parks, because that would
Yeah,
be
we don't want to get
very
sued.
irresponsible for me. I will say that, me and Jordan did not just like willy-nilly go, yay, the parks are open, and like run back to it. Like, we looked at the measures that Disney was taking, and we felt obviously comfortable enough to go back for at least one day to kind of see how it was. I will say that I think that Disney really is. I want to be careful with how I word this, because obviously the safest thing that Disney could do would be to not open the parks. That's obvious. I think, given that the parks are open, whoever is in charge of managing how they are keeping social distancing and all the other safety precautions that they are taking, I thought that they did a very good job at that.
Okay.
Again, obviously the safest thing would be to stay home. Obviously the safest thing would be to not go to Disney, regardless of whether or not they're open. If you do decide to go, you do it at your own risk. But I think I'll say Disney as a whole has been doing far more for safety and social distancing than any other business around me is doing. Okay. So, I mean, I don't know how much that speaks for them, because I don't know really how well the people are doing around me. But I will say that Disney very clearly had a lot of precautions in place. I don't think that there is much more that they could do, given that the parks are open.
Gotcha.
So,
That's good. I mean, that's good to hear.
that being said, I do not know how much they are going to be able to maintain that if and when crowds increase. Obviously, like I said, the day that we went was insanely low crowds. If they are able to get up to 30% capacity, I could certainly see them running into issues. Not really just with the things that they're doing, but just there's more people moving around. I mean, in the queues, even if people are staying 6 feet apart, staying on the markers like they're supposed to, there's still a lot of movement around the parks that's occurring out in the open that you might not be able to really maintain 6-foot distances with. So, again, like I said, my experience, because of the low crowds, is probably not going to be exactly how everybody's is, even if they go while all these precautions are in place. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And also, as I said before, that I want to reiterate, it depends very greatly on stuff that Disney can't control, like the other guests. If they are, strictly under their own power, maintaining 6-foot distancing and keeping their masks on and that kind of stuff. So yes, you are kind of at the will of how other people are acting. That's all I'll say as far as like the safety and how I felt about everything. But honestly, my biggest opinion on this was that the parks itself felt very, very different. The lack of a lot of the stuff that really makes Disney to me, that the theming, the street atmosphere, I'm not big on meet and greets, but I know that's a big thing for a lot of people, but just like the stores being open, and with the other guests not being there, is such a weird experience. Obviously it was fun getting to be back in the parks for a little bit, but it was not the same. I will say that very strongly. And my biggest opinion out of all this is that if I was out of state or even further away in state, where going to Disney was actually like a trip that I was planning, or something that wasn't just like like we can just, take an hour drive and get there. There's absolutely no way I would even consider going right now. Like, completely removing the safety aspect of it, with the experience that you get in the parks right now, I know that sounds bad to say, but like, no. Unfortunately, I don't think Disney is really able to do the full Disney experience right now. And because of that, I would definitely not suggest anybody that has to plan a trip right now.
I feel targeted.
And again, like, that's not even from a safety standpoint. Like, just if I knew that I was going to have to pay to get down there, to book a hotel, I mean, I know you're a pass holder, but especially if I was having to pay for tickets and that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
it ain't worth it right now.
Yeah.
As much as I love Disney and as much fun as it was getting to go back and do some of the attractions and stuff, it doesn't feel like Disney right now. And I don't really see that changing until this is over and done with.
Yeah, and you're not the first person I've heard to say something of that effect either. I've seen a few quote unquote influencers say that it's just not really like they were excited to get back in the parks, but they're not super eager to go again
Mhm.
because it doesn't feel like Disney.
Yeah. And honestly, me and Jordan also had reservations for this Saturday to go to Hollywood Studios, and I don't think we're gonna go. And I mean, at the same time, I was kind of looking forward to Hollywood Studios too, because there's there's two attractions. Like, we haven't done Rise of Resistance and we haven't done Runaway Railway, that we were kind of like, oh well, hey, if anything, at least we should be able to do those attractions. And honestly, like, especially after the experience that I had with Haunted Mansion, I was like, I don't, if that ends up really degrading the experience that I would get on these two new attractions, then I don't want to do them right now,
I
Yeah.
feel like from what I've seen, honestly, you probably don't want to do Rise right now.
Okay.
I
Or
don't-
Mickey and Minnie's. I've seen posts that there's like a pre-show type of thing that's not really running right now.
Yeah, I haven't looked at what's running now for Rise, and I'm going to say this again. Sorry, there's fireworks going off in the background of my audio here.
Happy Catholic Day.
So, but from what I know about Rise, I feel like it's probably not worth it to do this because a lot of that attraction is in the queue.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that almost half of the attraction is pre-show type of thing that really adds to the experience, and I wouldn't have wanted my experience to been different.
Well, that's probably going to solidify it then. So I don't really know, I don't want to say disappointing, because I'm glad that obviously Disney took a lot of measures to try to keep guests as safe as possible, given that the parks are open. I mean, open or close is another topic for debate, I think. But given that they're open, I'm glad that they are taking the all these safety precautions. But it definitely does have an impact on the experience that guests has in a negative ways, as far as just getting to enjoy the parks in a lot of ways. So just with that being said, like, yeah, I don't really know when we'll be going back.
Dang.
And then one last thing that I do want to touch on, though, is, as much as that sounded very, very negative, and again, I am not trying to bash or defend Disney on this. I want to give people as much, of the information as possible that are possibly planning a trip right now. But the one thing that I always want to give a shout out to the cast members, because that was the one part of the whole experience that did not feel weird or out of place, was any interaction that I had with a cast member, and that was really nice to get back to. Specifically, we had to go to guest services because I needed to get a new pass holder card because I broke mine. So, but obviously they're doing very good at keeping social distancing. But just, I don't know. I already feel bad for like the cast members that work at guest relations, because I feel like they have to put up with so many people. But they were incredibly friendly, incredibly personable, and the very limited time that we had to wait. Like the cast member was sitting there talking to us and everything, like being very interactive. So shout out to them. Cast members always do a great job, and it was like definitely the shining moment in an otherwise like very weird experience at Disney.
Nice. Yeah, cast members definitely don't get the credit they deserve.
That's for sure. But yeah.
But overall, general thoughts, any final things you want to wrap this up, because we're pushing over an hour now?
Again, going or not is your choice, but hopefully this was, like I said, there were things that I experienced that even though we keep up fairly well with the news and knew kind of how the experience was going to be, there were also things that I didn't know that were going to happen. So hopefully this was able to shed a little bit of light on that, and at least give you more information for you to make your own decision about going back or not.
Sounds good. I'm happy that you were able to experience the parks for a little bit, and that you have a lot of positive things to say about it.
Yeah, there were a lot of positive things, for sure. Still, I would say out of state, planning a trip, probably not a good time. But overall, yes, it was a positive experience getting to be back in the park.
Nice.
I'm just not going to talk because the finale of these fireworks is going off.
Oh, I did have one question. Were they were requiring masks on every single ride, even Splash Mountain, right?
Absolutely. Oh, and one more thing too, that yes, they were. And a quick suggestion that I will make, if you on your own decide to go back to the park, you might want to bring multiple masks. We had done this anyway. I heard some people that had actually watched a video on a guy that went back to Universal, and he was saying that, yeah, it's a really good idea to bring multiple masks, like, because you're eventually going to get sweaty in one, and it's nice to change out. I didn't really run into that. Like, my mask was pretty fine the whole time. But Jordan had a really good idea. She brought a couple of the disposable ones, and we wore that on Splash Mountain so that if they did get wet, we weren't waterboarding ourselves until we got off the ride. So
that is a good idea.
Again, just to be safe, probably a good idea, even if you're not riding any water attractions, to bring a mask in case, I don't know, it might blow off on an attraction. That's entirely possible. Might lose it, sit it down or something when you're eating and forget to bring it. Probably a good idea to bring a couple if you got them.
Or if it rains.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Because it is Florida after all.
It does rain here.
Well, any other questions, any final thoughts or anything?
Thanks for braving it for us, Brian.
Hey, you
really took one for the team.
I did it for y'all.
Last week while we were recording, Brian mentioned he was going, and I was like, "Oh, now you have to go because I'm curious." And he was like, "I guess I do have to go."
And again, like I said, honestly, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't excited to get back in the parks. But I really was almost. I'm not gonna say more, but I was almost equally curious just to see how it went as I was excited to get back there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was definitely interesting, and yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at too. It's more so I want to experience Disney in a weird way that I haven't experienced it before. Not so much that I'm eager to get back to the parks in its current state.
Yeah.